It's mostly here, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. As you'll notice, I'm not Sarah. Sarah's absent today, so I'm stepping in her place. So remind me if I'm doing anything procedurally incorrect. Do we have any voting board members online? I don't think so. Okay, so we don't need to talk about the remote participation policy. All right, okay, then we'll call this meeting to order, and I guess first up is matters from the public. Do you want to do that first?
I can call attendance too.
Oh, sorry, I didn't, yeah, we'll call attendance.
Yeah. Sarah Medley is not able to come today due to some family issues. Miss Dana Chen.
I'm here.
Mr. Stuart Gardner.
Here.
Mr. Jose Gomez.
Here.
Mr. Patrick Healy.
Here.
Mr. Ethan Heil.
Here.
Mr. Lee Condor.
Here.
Mr. Mari could not come today due to another meeting. Mr. Nathan Moore.
I'm here.
Mr. Danny Yoder could not be here today because he's out of town for work. Mr. Peter Thompson.
Present.
Mr. YY Ann.
Here.
And that's it.
Okay. So now we can move on to matters from the public.
Yeah.
We do have a visitor with us today, so you'll stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Paul Grady. I live just outside of Crozet. I came to one of these meetings a couple of months ago and I asked if I could make a presentation to you all. And I was told that I could and have as much as 20 minutes and be on the agenda and be in your packet. So I'm still hoping that this committee exists after next month and that I can do that in the new year. When Adam Malik was the chairman of the chart committee almost 25 years ago, I made 10 presentations to that committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I guess if we don't have any other matters from the public, we'll go ahead and sorry. Review and acceptance of the agenda. Review the minutes.
Yes,
Okay.
so,
Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
yes,
And I made a couple of corrections, which I
yes,
did to Sarah, so.
I can read them or we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the comments we received back from Mr. Condor said are as followed. He said the motion Stuart made and that he seconded included a condition that bike ped data be gathered and included. Subsequent discussion led to the removal of that condition, so the vote by the CTAC was not on the motion Stuart made, which is why he abstained. Yeah. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's good. If you read the minutes now, it looks like I seconded the motion and then opposed it. What happened was the motion that Stuart made got changed along the way and I believe I abstained unless someone remembers me opposing, but I think I just abstained. Yeah, yeah. And then there was just one spelling correction in the next paragraph. So it says they shift instead of shift without the F. That's a better catch
So
there.
it's already been included in the updaters.
Oh, I guess.
My inner demon, I guess.
It happens.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the updated minutes of the last meeting?
So,
Very small thing, just my name is misspelled.
oh, well, and yes, that includes the correct spelling of her name.
You have that, Sarah?
In the minutes or on the agenda?
In a minute.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall we move to approve them?
Before you also approve the agenda, there's an error there. I just learned it today, but I guess we can get there later.
Oh, I think we're just talking about the minutes from the last meeting for right now. So,
Well, I will move that we approve those minutes.
You want to say? Cool. Okay, approve the minutes from the last meeting, but you're right, I forgot to review. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda for tonight's meeting?
Yeah.
So what is the error, Sarah?
So the next item 6C says the next meeting will be January 28th, 2025. It should be 2026.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, it should.
Sorry.
I think that's a understandable mistake.
And it's usually, it would be move, second, discussion, vote.
Okay.
And vote's important.
Thank
We
you.
can do that, yes.
Okay, sorry, so
That's
should
okay.
we go back to that one?
Well, we should have the vote
Okay.
on whether we approve the minutes.
Okay, all right, Donna.
It's okay.
All right, let's take a vote on approval of the minutes.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Yeah,
Minutes are
it's
approved.
in the votes.
Sounds good. About for the agenda, do we have a motion to,
I move to approve.
And I second.
okay, we'll take a vote to approve the agenda.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, all good. Okay, so I think we'll move on to new business, starting with the discussion of the structure of CTAC.
So thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. So since about March of this year, you all have been having discussions sort of about what's the goal of CTAC, what's the purpose of CTAC, especially as we've had some turnover of membership and we've had new members join. The policy board has also been having discussions at their meetings about what CTAC, what the role of CTAC is supposed to be and how that differs from MPO Tech Committee. And so included in this packet, in anticipation of the policy board voting at their upcoming December meeting, there's a staff memo included in the packet identifying a couple of scenarios for the policy board to take under consideration for when they vote on the future structure of CTAC. These were just provided really to give them something to have discussion around and to talk through to help them facilitate that discussion. But they could also, of course, vote or decide something that's not included in this memo. And so we have it here on your meeting today, really just to offer space and opportunity for us to have a discussion as a committee about CTAC, for you all to be able to ask any questions or propose anything of your own. And this is also a voting item so that we can take your feedback as a recommendation to the policy board at their December meeting as well. So happy to open the floor and start the discussion on this one.
Do you want to briefly go over the proposed?
Sure.
Could we put that page up on the
Yeah.
board
Yeah.
there?
Mhm.
Be helpful, because remember, there were three
Mhm.
scenarios, yeah.
And just to recap a bit from the presentation that we provided to this group and the policy board, some of the things that we have been struggling with, I think for a number of years that you all, already know about is the unclear purpose of the committee, and that's both for CTAC members and for staff. And it's really hard also for us to help facilitate and administer this committee with that unclear purpose. There's also been challenges with the distinction between the role of CTAC and the MPO Technical Committee, since the Tech Committee does provide technical recommendations to the policy board on items that they're voting on as well. The uncertain chain of communication, and then also CTAC's desire to do activities and advise different bodies that are outside of the policy board's control. So those are a few of the challenges that hopefully the policy board will be trying to address in December. So scenario one has CTAC as an advisory committee for the long range transportation plan. And what that is basically taking CTAC back to the original CHART roots. And so CHART was a committee for the long range transportation plan. And they were really the citizen body responsible for helping educate the public on the LRTP, really operating under that hub and spoke sort of model where they take information back to their communities about the LRTP and about the planning process surrounding that major deliverable. So that's the first option. Another scenario that we included in this memo is CTAC as outreach and education support for the MPO. So there would be 5 distinct items on CTAC's sort of purview that you all would be providing recommendations for to the MPO policy board, and you would also be helping to educate the community on what each of these plans are and the general work of the MPO as well. And then scenario 3 has conclusion of CTAC as a formal committee. And so what was also included in that presentation where we did a deep dive on what the MPO does, the activities that we make decisions on, MPO staff, the MPO as a whole, we already do conduct public engagement on a project basis for each of the things that we're doing. And so it's not that public engagement is not captured. We are still doing that. This option would just give the policy board the flexibility and the opportunity to be able to set up ad hoc committees for projects as they saw fit. So those are the three that we included in there. That was just a very brief overview of what was included in your packet.
Can you talk more about the public engagement? Because
Yeah.
the scenario two does say providing input on the CA, MPO's public engagement processes. I've only been on for about 1.5 years, but I've missed some meetings. I don't recall us being involved in that. Is that, what would that look like? What does it look like if we do it now, and what would that look like?
So for the MPO, all of our outreach activities are sort of anchored by our public participation plan. And that's something that we are required to have per the federal code section that's identified for MPOs. That plan is updated once every 3 years. And so every 3 years, we take a look back and we think, is this how we want to be doing engagement? Does this satisfy what we think the work requires, what we think the community is looking for? We also have our Title VI implementation plan, but that does not have a regular update frequency to it. That is just updated as needed. That's how it's identified in federal code. And then otherwise, we also have the UPWP, which is our annual work plan. And so with that work plan, that basically is the MPO directing staff on what the priorities are, what they want us to work on for that fiscal year. And we certainly be looking to hear from the public as well on, are these the regional priorities? Is this how we want to be spending the MPO dollars and the resources that we have? Of course, the long range transportation plan, and then also smart scale project submissions. That is also a place where we would think that the public would want to weigh in on what are the projects that the MPO wants to submit.
I guess my question is what the scenario two says, that the CTAC would provide input on those plans.
Right.
On the actual public engagement plans, not.
Yes.
So do we do that?
Not that I'm aware of.
So what would it look like for this group to do that?
So anytime those plans would come up for update, it would look like staff bringing you like a working draft and getting your input on what are some other activities we could include in here. What do you all think about this? That's how it would look. And if we had any, major planning efforts, like the LRTP is obviously the biggest one, but if we had other like small area plans or studies, we would also look to CTAC to say, how should engagement look for this actual plan that we're doing, whether it's a LRTP or another study.
So the recommendations here on the bulleted items are only for the public engagement process with these particular topics.
Yes. And part of that is to help us clarify, what's the difference between CTAC and the MPO Tech Committee? If the Tech Committee is per the 3C agreement, if they are the committee and the group that's supposed to be providing those technical recommendations to the policy board, that's us trying to help, differentiate these two committees so that we don't have that duplication.
So who does the technical committee represent? If CTAC represents the public, who does technical committee represent?
So Tech Committee is made up of local government staff. And so typically that is planning staff at Charlottesville and Albemarle, and also planning commissioners are on Tech Committee as well.
So that sort of raises the question then, take the smart scale project for improvements to the Interstate 64 interchange 118 exit 118 interchange. What did the Tech Committee offer to that process? Anything?
So those typically we get updates at different milestones at our committee meetings, and feel free to jump in, Sandy. But there are also stakeholder working groups that are made up of staff at the local governments as well that are, receiving information as the planning process develops that they provide input on.
Do the three alternatives that VDOT presented in their survey represent the output of that committee? I mean, did they collaborate with that?
Yes, the answer is yes. That was part of the study work group meeting. MPO Tech, now that those scenarios were not necessarily fully presented to MPO Tech, they were presented to the study work group, which consists of similar stakeholders.
Like there's overlap in those
members. And they didn't present an alternative for then.
There were discussions. They didn't come out with a sketch, but for example, one of the pushing the ramp back, moving the ramp down and extending the turn lanes. by 100 feet was because of a discussion we had at a study work group meeting.
I see, well, see, so that's my problem then, is that I can provide technical data that's better than the technical committee does, so, but yet I'm not technically allowed to do so with CTAC, so it kind of makes for an interesting situation. If the tech committee can't provide useful technical input, then CTAC has to do it. And if CTAC doesn't exist, well, if CTAC can't do it, then I think it should be option 3, then just dissolve it. I mean, basically, we sit here and listen to presentations on things that are already done. You look at the agenda, that's all what it is. And even those things, public participation plan, especially unified planning work program, all of that stuff has just come to us as here it is. It's some big long document that rarely gets changed in the slightest before the policy board approves it.
Well, and some of what the challenge is, I think, is that the MPO also is not, always at the steering wheel for some of these things. Like these are also VDOT studies where we are a stakeholder, we participate, but it's ultimately not our plan and our process to be able to kind of, move around and dictate where the engagement gets to happen.
But at the end of the day, though, it's the MPO Policy Board that actually determines what smart scale submissions are going to be made. So you would think that they would want to have the best design possible, whether it comes from VDOT or not, for those proposals. So, in order for us to contribute meaningfully to that process, we need, to be able to explore some of those options. I mean, there's certainly a lot of interest in this committee on alternate transportation modes, bike and transit and which VDOT sort of does and sort of doesn't. So yeah, if we're not allowed to provide meaningful input, then there's no point to the committee. I mean, I sent a letter to Chairman Galloway and said as much. I mean, I showed him what my design was for that interchange, and I said, VDOT spent tens of thousands of dollars to come up with 3 alternatives that none of them is terrific and one of them is terrible. And for probably less money than at least 2 of them, if not all 3, you could have a scenario that actually worked, and it cost nothing for me to provide that information. But
if I could jump in though, what it would say, regardless of what features for this committee, all the information, I mean, Mr. Condor, we took your concept that you sent us and we presented it to our consultants. So you as an individual citizen, whether you're representing CTAC or not, will still have an opportunity to provide feedback into those processes.
I realize it, and that, yeah. But go ahead, yeah.
I guess that,
no.
my main thought is, if this board does not exist for the citizens to provide comment, there still needs to be a way for the citizens to provide comment.
Yeah.
So if that already exists, then yeah, arguably, do you need this board? If that doesn't exist in a formal way, then it's really important that this board stays together and we find a way to more efficiently give our feedback and make sure that feedback is heard. I think the key thing is the public has to have a pathway that's easy to participate, because we see across the country, no one shows up for these types of meetings. This is the first speaker we've seen in a year, and it's power that individuals have to voice their concerns. And if this doesn't exist, there has to be some way to do that.
And I will agree with that, and I know what you're saying about as individual citizens, we can attend any of these meetings and make our comments, but the point of having a consistent body like this is that there's a context established, right? So if we're here and we're going through each of these documents and phases of things, we can understand how everything is interrelated. So unless, you know, it's a big ask for an individual citizen to just go to each of those meetings, especially like the policy meetings, board meetings, or during the day, during people's work days. To go to those on a consistent basis to understand the entire context of all the decisions that are being made by the MPO. And I think that is the unique nature of this committee, the fact that we meet frequently enough so that folks generally understand like what phase of something we're in. You know, we're not claiming to be the staff, like we're not as involved in it as the staff, but there's that. I think the feedback you get is going to be more valuable because it's not just someone coming in, you know, at one point during a project or a phase selection where they wanted to voice, you know, one particularly strong opinion about something because it impacts their property. But instead, it's like you're having a committee of folks that's committed to coming here regularly to discuss these transportation investments at a larger scale. And I think you're not going to get that same kind of audience saying that individual citizens can go to any of these meetings. I mean, I agree in theory, yes, but in reality, it's not how it plays out, right?
Well, question honestly more about scenario one, which overlaps with two, but with the long range transportation planning process, what is the cadence, the sort of cycle of how often I do that? Please remind me, I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe it's every 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, it has to be updated every 5 years,
Yeah.
but it depends
But to
on how
hit
long you
that
want to
date.
plan for it to take.
Right.
A year or two.
Right.
So ours takes a year or two and it happens
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah.
And the okay. Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of, so I mean, you know, so I'm here as a rep from the Albemarle County Planning Commission, and I do. It's kind of cool when I'm driving around and I can sort of see like, oh yeah, we're going to submit a proposal right there, and you know, that's personally cool. But you know, I can also then take the stuff from this meeting and go, you know, kind of give my little 3-minute, 2-minute spiel report back to the Planning Commission. I don't know how much. Just giving, you know, being sent a slide deck once in a while would be worse than coming here. I don't know that I would lose a lot per se. I mean, I like all of you. It's nice to see you, but I don't know how much the gathering is required for me to do my part of that. I mean, I'm not. I don't really want to just sort of see it go away. But scenario one would be acceptable, and 2 might be okay too.
That is scenario 1 wholesale included in scenario 2? So scenario 2 is just an expansion of it, or does anything disappear when you go from 1 to 2?
It's a great question. So we only did these sort of at a high level before we really dived into all the details, just because we wanted some direction from the policy board on how to proceed. But I would imagine just as whenever we're in an LRTP update year, our policy board and tech committee go to meeting every single month. I would imagine CTAC would probably follow that same cadence if you all were involved in the LRTP, whether it's scenario 1 or scenario 2.
The way it's written, it seems like under scenario 1, CTAC is making recommendations directly for the LRTP visioning goals and major trade-offs. Whereas in scenario 2, it really, the first sentence anyway, really focuses on CTAC as a committee to increase public engagement processes for the other tasks, not as in like advisory board for those tasks.
Okay, thank you.
That's what it reads like.
And I guess my follow-up would be like, do those need to be mutually exclusive, or can it not? It's hard enough to staff these groups, and if we are coming together and agreeing to continue to do so, can we not do both? Especially if the cadence is such that there's maybe a year or 2 of more intense focus where maybe some of the other stuff drops off, and then we shift back to more of the public engagement work. I don't know if that makes sense.
That does make sense.
The language of scenario 1 suggests that maybe some of the things that have been brought up would be possible there. They speak of matching a cadence, which, as Leah's pointed out, we're usually after the fact. So I'm not sure what matching the cadence actually means, but and someone, I think you said that this would be similar to what happened under chart. I'm not sure what happened under chart. If you could expand on number 1. And then I have another comment about 2.
And so when we went back and did sort of a deep dive on the history of the MPO and CTAC, CTAC used to be called CHART because that's also what our LRTP used to be called at one point in time. And so CTAC back then would do everything surrounding the long range transportation plan, as far as there was like a one pager disseminating surveys to the public, like helping get more surveys that would influence the LRTP, really taking a lead under that effort specifically, and didn't have bylaws until 2013 or 2014. But before then, there's just like a 1 or 2 page memo that I was able to find on the establishment of CHART as a committee. And it said meet once per year outside of the LRTP update years. And so that's where a lot of this language came from, just trying to mimic what it was at that time.
Okay, and then the other side of Stewart's coin is nobody ever shows up at any meetings. It's just not something people do. That said, you all, the MPO, VDOT, planning commissions, everybody could hit all their marks. They could check all their boxes, every data point in the right place on every spreadsheet. So the project is implemented, and 60 people show up at the next city council meeting raising hell. You did something wrong. And Stewart says, here's a pressure relief valve. Here's a place people can come ahead of that time to address anything, really. And so that's what I see as the value here is the representational value that we have. And that's very important. So
Yeah, so I think with the existence of technical committee, I think this body is supposed to focus more on like higher level questions and more on the value side of it rather than technical side of it. That's my understanding. So like for instance, like highway intersection design, that will be technical review. But I think this has more meaningful existence if we can set as a high level value input to the long range planning committee, for instance. Like, do we want to expand the highway versus do we want to have more of a public transit across the MPO, the metropolitan area, right? But I think that's probably the reason why this may exist. If I don't know how that would work, but that's my understanding of it.
Adding to some of I agree that we need to have venues that are very accessible for people to speak up, even if a small percentage of people do. But in thinking about this more and talking to commission staff some last night, is the MPO hosted within the PDC the right place for it? And I do question that. I've been thinking about that a lot since last night. And part of it is, first of all, the MPO covers where a lot of people live and work, but geographically a small percentage of our region, since it's just the urban area. That's a gap. And the way the planning district commission is, I mean, the planning district is created by the entities, the municipalities, the jurisdictions, and the answer to the jurisdictions. And I do some other work in age-friendly areas around transportation. And, you know, we're constantly reminded that the PDC doesn't advocate. I mean, that's like the devilish word around here. Because they can't advocate to their bosses. And that's a problem because advocacy is what's needed, and that's, I mean, advisory and advocacy, you can nitpick and try and fit, but to me, it's pretty much the same thing, and that's what's needed in getting a public voice. And so I think there's some structural problems with trying to do that within the MPO, within the TKPDC. I don't know where I land right now. I've been wrestling with this for a couple of days myself. But that's just a point that I'm grappling with that I thought would be worth sharing. And, I think there's also the component that many of us, and I've been guilty of this, I want to change the world. I don't want to just change what's put in front of us around the MPO. I want better bike bed. I want transit. I want this. I want smart traffic lights. It's not building roads, put more smart traffic lights in, and that's just not. It's not the place for that. And, so I don't know what there is not a place for that very well. But another component of that is, the bylaws and the description of us on the CTAC page says, we're supposed to represent ourselves and stakeholder groups. And I don't know, I mean, I try to do that, and I do that some because I do wear several other hats and we're having conversations. I bring those filters and that feedback to the table, and people know I'm involved in transportation. So people often do ask me, it's like, what's going on? Why in the hell do we need that big pedestrian bridge? That must cost a fortune. I figured out the best answer is like, do you have a car? Well, of course I have a car. Well, then that's why you don't understand. You go without a car for a month living out there and see why we need that. Anyway, so I do, but I don't know how much structurally we can all do that, how realistic that is. And if we are expected to do that in any scenario, how are we recruiting for this committee? And is it, it's MPO city and county appointees, is that the right way to create the people around this table? The Albemarle County Community Advisory Committees, it doesn't really work all this well. I think it's a little too rigid, but it's supposed to be, somebody representing the neighborhood, somebody representing development interests, somebody representing different things. We may want to think, if we continue, and if that's part of our role, how we constitute this group.
Just to build on that, I mean, if the purpose in any of these really, but even scenario 2 in particular is public engagement and outreach, that's a public spoke model, then we recruit for people who are sort of like connected to lots of people, right? I mean, not necessarily people with, turgid experience, expertise or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, the expertise is connected.
Yeah, so to build on it a little bit more, then we should have scenario 4, but this becomes an advocacy group.
And that will not happen within the TJPDC.
Well,
but from everything I've heard.
But I think we should offer it as an alternative, and either it's gonna become that or it's gonna cease to exist. So if they don't want our opinions, then fine. Stamp it out, dissolve it, and that's the end of it. If they do want valid opinions, and frankly, I was appointed to this board by Chairman Galloway because I had presented him with a number of traffic designs for Ryle Road and so forth, but so he said, well, this would be a good place to stick you, so he pointed to the board. So my tenure on this board ends in April, and I'll have served 2 terms, which is the limit, so you won't see me after that in any case, but I agree with Peter. It really should be an advocacy board. I mean, instead of listening to a bunch of done deals that we have very little input on, we should be able to talk about pedestrian bike ped structure and where it's lacking, how it could be improved. Smart traffic lights, how traffic could be improved with just changing traffic lights. It's like, instead of a $45 million roundabout on Ryle Road at Hillsdale, $500,000 or less, reprogram the traffic lights, you solve the problem. And I get nowhere proposing those things, but still they should be proposed. They need another voice, an independent voice that I mean, the tech committee is just county and city staff. they're not paid to dream big, I guess, let's put it that way. I mean, they deal with the mundane nitty gritty, but as far as long range vision of things, it isn't there. At least from what I've seen, but if it's gonna be anywhere, it's gonna be here.
What if you had citizens, let's say 3 citizens on a rotating basis added to the MPO Policy Board? What if you expanded a little bit the scope of the policy board and said, let's that also include citizens?
So the policy board is made up, the voting members are elected officials.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of a little bit of the rub of that of, we have one non-voting representative for CTAC, and that's typically the chair that gets to sit on that committee and represent the interest of CTAC and bring up the things that you all bring up in your committees. And then we have the same non-voting opportunity for MPO Tech Committee as well for the vice chair of CTAC.
Curious, could that change? Is that?
Yeah,
It's
I
in
mean,
the
if
CTAC
the
agreement.
goal is.
I think it is in the
to be
3C agreement.
The public, then why don't,
Well, and what Sandy just brought up, so the 3C agreement that we signed with the state, the local jurisdictions and the transit providers, it identifies like what the structure of the policy board is supposed to be.
So it's a state level.
Yeah.
Simple change, but I like what you're thinking though, because I'll just, I'm not sure this is the best group even to be getting citizen input. If all we're doing is advising to another decision making body, we're a filter that may not be the best thing. If it should be at the policy level. I mean, that's where citizens should be encouraged. At least I think that should be. Yeah, I'll let that fly.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was what I was thinking, and I agree with Peter and Lee. I think we do that. I think each in our way, kind of between the lines, because the agendas are heavily toward the fait accompli. But there is advocacy that happens here. And speaking for myself, that's what I find useful. So I think to some extent we all do that. But that the structure here, which I know and what's being stated all around tonight is that there's no reception for it under this structure. But what you just brought up, what I was thinking when you guys said advocacy is the crux of the thing is that we are all appointed. And when you go to advocacy, it becomes political in a way that this is theoretically apolitical. It can't go political. And so then do we want a member of MPO or a member of the city manager's office or whoever appointing people to be political actors? And the spread there is between the appointed and the elected. And at certain points, and policy may be one of those, certainly spending money is, it can only be done by elected officials. So our advice, which I believe is valuable, this gentleman's advice, anybody else who wants to come, is valuable. But under this structure, as appointees, we should be limited in what we do, because otherwise you have, as I say, a county executive appointing some people who then say this will be the policy, as opposed to a elected board which does that. So I think Taylor hit it on the head. Part of it is that this other board, this policy board, is in fact made up of elected officials and can be. Which is
The policy board is
Oh,
elected
sorry,
officials.
policy board.
policy,
It's got a lot of non-voting members as well.
but I think you said the voting members.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And VDOT, there's a VDOT representative, that's a voting member.
That's there. That's not gonna go away. And in a way, then I think it's incidental to what we're, I think we have to come up with what would work for us. But that's the boat we're in. We're not gonna make policy. However, we can affect the policy that is made, hopefully. Through one of these, I'm kind of interested in scenario one myself, depending on how that can be structured or how it was. As I said, I don't know that much about chart. And some of it appears to be just timing, certainly. That was the first thing that came in here. So it was always, you know, we were just always a couple steps behind.
Mr. I was gonna ask, I have a thought, maybe each one of you are appointed by the city, the county, or the MPO. Perhaps to help steer the conversation back to a close up. Of course, we can provide more input later. Mr. Condor was suggesting scenario 4, which is not here. Perhaps express your thoughts, view based on this, or maybe outside of this, or whatever is not there, so that we can collect that information and put it together as we present these scenarios to the policy board, just to advise. And you had reasons to apply to be part of CTAC, or you were appointed because somebody saw something in you they were hoping you would bring to the body and the region. Perhaps combining all those and what we presented today, you could just sum up your idea. This is where I stand, or ongoing, not a firm stance, but to help us kind of conclude somehow this evening, because we
have several folks who spoke up about wanting to do some form of advocacy / advisory type work. And that if that is not something that this committee can do, then perhaps it should be dissolved, because that's the thing that people are most interested in and feel the most
Just to be very clear, what I was saying is that we do advocate, but I was talking about, say, let's call it a advocacy. In other words, you know, someone from an NGO gets appointed, and then all we know.
I mean, I think you're right. I think in theory that can happen. I think in practice right now there's not a lot of people applying to be on the committee, so that's probably not
it has happened on positions. Because it's just natural in the board, politics being what it is. So
another idea is, you know, we could dissolve this organization, but yet all commit to show up to every MPO policy board. They have time at the beginning and the end, and we can sit through and listen to whatever they're presented, and at the end, we provide our feedback. Do that mechanism that already exists.
I think that Donna brought up a good point. There's like the difference between like theory and practice. And to me, a couple of you have brought up the idea of, well, if we can't do this, we might as well dissolve it. But I do think there's like an important consideration of this. Would I really show up to these meetings, as you point out, if it's not like on my calendar and I'm not getting like kind email reminders? Probably not. I don't want to speak for everyone else.
Right.
And also like there is a counterfactual where like if this doesn't exist, I think honestly, in my opinion, is it disappears as a forum entirely. And maybe a couple of us have the extra time to show up occasionally to these meetings. But I guess I worry about the perfect being the enemy of the good here. Like even if we can't do the advocacy that we all want to do, like even keeping some sort of framework and like working towards aspiring to do that, I would be much more comfortable with than maybe framing this in a forum that we aren't present in as, well, if we can't do this, then we might as well dissolve it. And then all of a sudden it's like the rug's been pulled away.
And I would say that, like, I think the difference here is that not only are we coming to these meetings, but like the agendas of these meetings are set in collaboration with the chair. So this is tailored somewhat to the interests and like, you know, wants of the committee. Whereas if we attended the policy committee meeting as citizens, that is not what's happening. We are reacting to what something that another body has set at the agenda, you know, and we're providing a reaction.
And I will say, but even so, like we are able to accommodate, you all requested like the bike ped presentation be added on here. So we found someone who could come and speak to that. But largely right now, how it's been set is anything the MPO Policy Board is considering is what ends up on the CTAC agenda as well. The same with the MPO Tech Committee. They provide recommendations on the things that the Policy Board is taking action on. So largely, these agendas are pretty identical, more or less.
I mean, I agree with you, but
Yeah.
but what I was saying, I think there is an avenue for this to
Yeah.
be something, and occasionally it has been, right? So, I mean, I think
Mhm.
we can't say how it's been operating for the last couple of years of
Mhm.
standard we're going by, because we haven't really known what our, mission is, I would say, so.
Yeah.
I have a question that may sound seem like a sidelight, but isn't in my mind, maybe I can explain why. So how, and something Ethan was talking about showing up and, Albemarle County residents, well, the city has it now too. Sends out regular emails, you sign up for, and it's got all kinds of information. Very helpful information about what meetings there are, links to the agendas and stuff like that. If those of us that are a little more wonky get Sean Tubbs, and he's got a whole lot more meetings out there. And everything that's happening in the entire planning district, I don't know how it does it. But does TJPDC send out communications?
So we have a quarterly newsletter, and then we also have a monthly newsletter that goes out. And that is a mixture of like meetings coming up, but also like a recap of the work that's been happening also in the region. But some of what's also in this discussion is staff resources and staff capacity. And so the PDC doesn't have a full-time comms person, for example. And so capacity could be a concern if we wanted to do like a more frequent sort of newsletter like that.
Thank you, I probably get that, but again, it's not standing out to me as much.
Yeah.
Would there be a way, because I think part of it, several of us have talked about, it's like the need to get to encourage and make it more obvious for how citizens have an opportunity to speak up where and when. Because some of us were raised this way and we just do it. And, we figure it out. Most people don't. And it can be but people feel powerless and overwhelmed and all kinds of other things, more so today than usual. So would part of that answer be that the MPO, knowing that you don't have comm staff, is working with the city and county that do have comm staff and do have weekly emails going out to make sure that what's happening at the TJPDC is getting fed through. Not a lot, particularly think of those two jurisdictions, but all jurisdictions. I don't know what else the rest do. And that may just be not necessarily a question, but a thought. It doesn't really resolve these issues. But while we're trying to grasp it, different, how to get things done, I thought that was relevant. And I'll just also state that I'm very cognizant, and I'm still wondering where I would land if take a look on me. But I am cognizant that there is a cost to this group. And all of not my time, but taxpayers, we are paying for this in different ways. And it's an opportunity cost of all the time staff's paying to staff this is not doing other work. And I don't, I think we just all need to be mindful of that. I don't think we are, but I think it needs to be out there. And my sense is that that's part of the conundrum, particularly in this light where, funding doesn't seem to be raining from the heavens to much of anybody right now. Are we taking a vote on what we recommend? Is that what, or we just expect to say? Well,
You suggested that maybe we should kick this around a little more, maybe something you got settled
Yeah,
at this meeting.
I mean, I
Do it online.
And a little bit more context. So the policy board at their October meeting, when we asked them, is there anything else staff can provide for you, in anticipation of you all making a decision at your December meeting? And they wanted to know what CTAC thought. And so they wanted to invite you all to the next policy board meeting, but they also wanted to know what you all think as far as the committee and its structure. And so whether that's, the group determining if one of these scenarios, is something that you all would be interested in, or if there's a combination of them, or if it's none of these at all, I think any feedback would be valuable for the policy board.
Seems like of the three options presented, one has more favorable reception than the other two, but I think the solution that most want is not one of these scenarios presented.
Ms. Chen, if I may, I think I'm new to this. This is a platform for citizens, right? You are all individual citizens appointed to be here. I think this is the time on the record, just state, like, speak up. That's the point. The TJPDC exists to facilitate you all so that your voice will be heard. So I think we can just, I'm feeling sensing there's vagueness somehow. It's good to just propose and then we move forward. If I may,
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're.
Yeah, I think we've been.
I'm not sure what you're suggesting.
Yeah.
What's our opinion on
yeah.
a vote on one of these?
And then if that helps, just clearly, Mr. Thompson, you can just state your thoughts, final or non-final, we record, and then we something to build up, to build on as we go forward. So you can, for instance, I can say, see, I go with scenario 1 or 2, but I'd like for the policy board to think about doing something else. And then we move on, we record your proposition or your thoughts instead of just, that's it's just a thought to help facilitate the conversation, because you are here and we are here to facilitate you. Sorry.
So with that in mind, and with the structure of Robert's move, second, and discuss, I would move that we accept proposition for option 1. And if we get a second, let's discuss that in particular. In particularly, as Sarah has said, 1 with sauce. This is what we think 1 really ought to say. So I'll make that formal movement.
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
I think there was a lot of comments about how the current body is functioning and not functioning as intended. But I think this discussion should not be anchored on that. I think it should be anchored on more of the principle, like whether this type of body has a reason to exist. And then the next step is like how to make the body function as intended. I feel like these two are separate things, and if it makes sense, I think that may be a problem.
Which is why I moved specifically for 1. So we're not mixing. And if no one seconds, then we might move for 3. And then we can discuss that if we get a second.
Well, I think, again, before the procedural, sorry, I'm breaking Robert's rules. I think to your point, the number 1 is probably closest to why the CTAC was created in the first place. Then we just kind of grew from there. So.
Is it correct that all other decisions are dictated by the long-range transportation plan?
Well, I would say it's a roadmap, right? It doesn't have, the long transportation plan itself doesn't have.
Right. No pun intended.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, because it's long-term, it's not usually, has something, it doesn't dictate what happens on an annual basis, budget. Right.
Particularly not.
It seems like the long-range transportation plan says we're going to focus 100% on superhighways, then all decisions in that should focus on superhighway. Or bicycling. So that to me is kind of Patrick's point, like if it's 1, where is the biggest decision that we can plug in that would dictate all other decisions?
Consensus building up. So it's not like a zoning ordinance where you have to do what it says, but it should be something where you expend a lot of effort to get everybody to.
Like in the county.
Like you said,
Yeah, well, like in the county, we just wrapped up our comprehensive planning process, right? It took 2.5 to 3 years, and it's a very long document, not as long as the previous, and but there's still like 300 priorities. So now there's a process of like, all right, which ones are the short-term priorities, which ones are the top priorities? Staff has to kind of go through and do some of that filtering. That will then lead to a zoning modernization act. That'll lead to all these other things. So,
but any smart scale selection shouldn't contradict what's in the long range whatever, LRTP.
We've got
Mhm.
the evaluation process for a smart scale.
Yeah. So,
So I would say it guides it, but it's not, it doesn't dictate what
Yeah.
happens.
So yeah, I don't think I'm ready to go yet. Yes, I mean, I guess we're doing the discussion part anyways, but scenario one seems like, other than dissolving this, quite a big departure from what we have been doing. And I'm having trouble squaring that with what I'm hearing as like a rough consensus of continuing to meet different versions of advocacy or connecting to the community, particularly if it's sort of like monthly for a while, right? But then it sort of like disappears and only meets once a year. I feel like that becomes a hard venue for the public to get to. So I guess I'm like butting in for some seconds your vote, Patrick, but I guess I'm if the idea is like to buy ourselves more time, since this is going to happen in December, I think to me, none of these are perfect, but two would be the closest to what we're doing now. It also seems like it has the widest charge and most flexibility. Even though it does say explicitly like just advising on public engagement. But I think, I don't know, it's just my opinion on, I feel like that's the closest to where we've been. I'm not ready to make a motion on it yet, but just while we're talking about things.
and your point about perfect enemy is good really resonated. It may not be clear, but there's value in having forum.
Maybe one quick follow-up. So this idea of the LRTP year, when is that?
We just adopted one fiscal year 24.
So scenario for option one means if it's accepted, we meet once the next couple of years. Is that right? So that's like dissolve light.
Yeah.
I think to me.
No, you would meet the year of the update, right? Once a year.
Right. So then yeah, it's like see you guys next year, see the year after that, and then we'll like get to know each other again. And just practically, is that correct?
Well, again, we didn't fully bake like into all the details what a transition would look like or anything like that.
Sure.
These were just, very highest level. Here are some ideas.
Yeah.
For you all.
So I appreciate your effort to try to move to action, but I think it is difficult because I don't think we can vote on a scenario.
With no second.
Something else. But
And I think that this conversation is the most important thing on the agenda, so I would be fine not worrying about time and spending the rest of our time on this topic. I would agree. I don't know what's on the.
So we do.
What we asked for the bike ped.
And we do have an invited guest. He is on, David Cook, for the bike ped presentation this evening. And so Donna, I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to cover that item, at least since he's here for that?
Don't get other reports, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, but they're fait accompli, so.
I'm just saying, while we're stopping and thinking about
I think
process.
the other reports
Is
are
it just
justified.
David or is there other things?
David's the only external one that's got it.
I think to your point, Peter, since we all received the packet, we all know what's in, the performance safety targets, regional transportation dissolution, cancel transportation improvement plan. So we're asked to vote on all of them, so why not we just take one mass vote and say, yeah, we approve it, because what other choice do we have?
Look at me, I'm not in charge.
Well, so we could dismiss
We're gonna have this
all,
presentation for now.
yeah,
We got David's up
okay.
now.
And so while we're getting all queued up, today we have David Cook, who is the statewide bike and pedestrian coordinator for VDOT. And so this item spurred from at your last meeting, you had an update on our regional travel demand model, and you had a lot of discussion and questions about why we don't have, the best bike ped data, and you wanted to learn more about that. And so David, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you, Taylor. I can hear you well. There are occasions where it kind of fades in and out. So if we get the questions and it kind of fades out, I'll let you know. But for now, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
All right, good deal. And Taylor, I'm not sure if it's easier. I do have the slides up on my end as well. Either way, I can share my screen or we can just go through it on your end. But
Yeah,
let me see
if
if
you wanna-
this works.
You can share.
Is everybody able to see this? I'm going to go ahead and put it in presentation mode. Does that look good?
Yep, we can see it.
All right, good deal. Well, thank you everybody for having me. As Taylor mentioned, I'm with VDOT Central Office, Transportation and Mobility Planning Division. I've been with TMPD for about 2.5 years and with VDOT for about 13 years altogether. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Active Transportation Count program in Virginia, some of the benefits of the program, but also some of the limitations of estimating travel demand models for pedestrian and bicycle trips. And as you know, we have a lot of travel demand models. Every MPO is required to have a travel demand model that basically forecasts out vehicular trips out to a horizon year, typically 30 years in the future, like 25, 30 years in the future. It's very good at kind of like estimating demand on facilities for vehicular data. But why don't we really have that for pedestrian and bicycle data? So I'm going to kind of work through some of the limitations of why we don't have very good data for the models for use for estimating bike and pedestrian trips. And I will kind of set the context here that modeling pedestrian and bicycle behavior is far more context sensitive and nuanced than vehicular data specifically. We have a lot of tube counts out there. We have a very robust count program for vehicular trips through studies, through our TMS, our traffic management system that goes out annually and looks at kind of trends year to year for different segments of roadway. And then we also, for all of our studies, we do have a lot of counts as well for vehicular data. So all of that kind of feeds the model and specifically pathways for planning that TMPD produces has a lot of planning level information for traffic forecasting on roadways. Unfortunately for bike and pedestrian trips, just because of the requirements for understanding bike and pedestrian trips, the amount of data that we need in terms of base count data is just not there. We have one of the biggest active transport programs in the country in Virginia, but it doesn't go back far enough and it doesn't capture the various types of facilities and non-facility types, specifically on road where you don't currently have bike lanes, on sidewalks where we get pedestrian data. The vast majority of our counts have been on either two-way cycle tracks, bike lanes, or shared use maps. Also, survey data from the National Household Travel Survey really doesn't get down to the level where you need to get bike pedestrian trips. So this kind of affects the calibration of the model and it makes it unreliable. There was an article that came out recently that looked at replica data and it found pretty consistently in every site they analyzed, comparing replica's model data to the real life count sites. I believe in Berkeley and a couple of other cities that they were often off by about 8 times, as much as like undercounting by as much as 8-fold. In some cases, they were overcounting by as much as 8 times the actual number. And it seemed to be very, very random. And that data is based on LBS data or location-based services and cell phone data. It's a big data company. So they haven't quite perfected it yet. So we're still seeing that issue. Count programs for bike and pedestrians are sparse and inconsistent among MPOs and local governments. For example, we just installed our first bike counter in Stanton. Beyond that, in Stanton and the city of Stanton, we don't have a lot of good data for a lot of cities outside of just a few, namely Richmond. Charlottesville had a program that kind of went back years that we're starting to get started back up. But other than that, outside of just like Nova and Richmond, we have very few counters out there. As you're aware, we have these traffic analysis zones. They're really currently set up mainly for vehicular trips, which tend to be a lot longer than pedestrian and bicycle trips. They encapsulate whole block groups. Typically, they're kind of an agglomeration of blocks into what you would call kind of like a block group or traffic analysis zone. Typically, bike and pedestrian trips occur within intrazonal areas. So you would need a much more granular area to estimate demand on a facility within like a model. It would need to get down to a pedestrian analysis zone, which currently VDOT or Virginia does not have the capacity to get down to such a granular geography. Most EDMs are roadway based and built for motorized travel using functional class speed as primary attributes. Bike pedestrian facilities require higher spatial resolution, sidewalk continuity, crossing, grade, slope, and buffer type. Rarely do we have a lot of this data available. We are currently creating a statewide inventory of sidewalks and crosswalks. We should have that developed by the beginning, probably around March or April of 2026. So we're moving along with that, but it doesn't really get into the level of attribute data for forecasting trips on a specific facility. These missing elements make it very hard to accurately represent real path choice or perceived safety of non-motorized modes. So even though we have the inventory, it doesn't really have things like barriers that a pedestrian or a bicyclist might have to reaching their destination, both perceived and real barriers. So there are all different kinds of elements that are very context sensitive that go into whether or not a bicyclist or pedestrian chooses to go a route or not. And we're seeing that consistently with all of our counts that we do in Virginia. So there really is like no commonality in terms of like population density might be a good measure, but we have really good facilities in highly dense areas that get far less use than, say, the Virginia Capitol Trail or the current segment of the Fall Line Trail that just opened in Hanover County. Also, those trips are very, very different. One is more focused on recreation, and others may be focused on both recreation and utility, and others around schools may have very different peak hours compared to other parts of the vehicular network. And existing models cannot realistically capture the the effects of small scale improvements, such as adding a crosswalk, protected lane, or travel connection. These micro level changes have localized benefits that aggregate models that cannot detect meaningfully. So those are kind of the drawbacks that we see. And we do get the question a lot about, like, if we were to do a pedestrian bridge at this location, what would be the estimated demand or what would be the forecasted use of that facility? But without really knowing the surrounding connectivity of the network, the surrounding counts of the location, kind of the demographics, the land use, the connections, the generators, it's very hard to get down to a granular level. What we can do is we can look at proxy sites. We can look at other bridges where we've done counts. For example, we're going to be putting a counter on the Route 29 pedestrian bridge that just got built. And as a part of that, we're also going to be doing some field assessments, looking at crossings at the intersection, further downstream, I think towards Rye Road. And then like people who are attempting to do mid-block crossings at locations, if it affects people's behavior, if people are more willing to walk a little bit further for a safer crossing at the pedestrian bridge, or if we still have people who are just taking the shortest path, even if it means crossing at a location where there isn't a safe crossing to do so. So what do we do with our counting non-motorized strips? So this program for VDOT has been in existence since 2018. Pretty robust program, but we've actually had counters deployed in Virginia as far back as 2012. Roanoke was kind of the leader in that. Starting in 2012, they deployed a number of traffic counters on the Roanoke River Greenway and then expanded that to their sidewalk network downtown. So theirs has been going on consistently for 13 years. They have one of the oldest count program in Virginia. But as far as VDOT's count program, we have been doing that since 2018. That's housed under the Transportation Mobility Planning Division. And we do a series of short duration counts to help support studies. And we do longitudinal year-over-year counts to get trends and also develop seasonal adjustment factors. And then we also do continuous count sites on about 30 different facilities statewide. We utilize counters to count all different kinds of active transportation modes. These are bidirectional counts. We use eco counters. So they're out of Montreal, Canada. So we kind of contract with them. They're kind of the proven count program vendor that provides a lot of really good counters that uses kind of like sensor data as well as pneumatic tubes to pick up bicyclists, but get into that. But we kind of look at shared use paths on street bike facilities, sidewalks, and trails in Virginia. We also do special duration or short-term duration counts and special study counts, looking at before and after roadway reconfiguration, support active transportation investments, and measure performance of newly built projects. Some of the count services we offer, permanent counts, so continuous count sites, year-over-year counts, short duration counts, and technical assistance. This is available to anybody in Virginia. We have a loaner program where you can actually go and request through the Active Transportation newsletter. We reserve a content in there for people to go in and actually, if they have a study or if they have an initiative or some kind of something they want to look at counts at a location, then they can go in and do that. For example, Safe Routes to School program in Fairfax County has requested counts around 6 schools up there to take a look at kind of the travel behavior, where students are crossing, how far they're going, and kind of like the directional counts around schools, because they're interested to see what types of countermeasures are needed for the biggest crossing locations, potential RFBs, PHBs, just get a sense of like where people are walking to school and what are the most common areas for crossing. We also have a count transportation network map. This is not only VDOT's counters, but we also network with Arlington's counters, which they have a very big program of about 30 permanent counters, as well as Roanoke and other local governments that have their own counters. We will also provide data upon requests. VDOT utilizes the Eco Counter automated counting equipment. So we do a range of different counters on different facilities and durations. We can get down to the 15-minute interval generally on this. Here are some example pictures. The one on the top left is Franklin Street through VCU in Richmond. The city is planning to extend their two-way cycle track up through VCU on Franklin, from Monroe Park up to Stewart Circle. It's about 0.8 miles, and that's a one-way road. So those are 2 one-way travel lanes in the eastbound direction. The goal would be to eliminate, just like the part of the existing Franklin Street cycle track, it would be to eliminate one travel lane to accommodate a two-way cycle track. We got bidirectional data, and we saw about 20% of users or counts were in the westbound direction contraflow to traffic. So that definitely highlighted the need for having a contraflow facility there. So we do infrared counters. These are done through our multi-mobiles as well as our pyros. And we do pneumatic tubes for on-street counters. You can kind of see those in the top left here and here and here and here. The urban multis, this basically pairs the infrared sensor with the tube. So we're able to get a mode split for bikes and pedestrians. And then this is just the pyro right here. So this just gets all counts that pass by groups, both bikes and pedestrians, as the same kind of active transportation count. I will note that these equipments do require a lot of maintenance and routine inspection, just because of the amount that could happen in the field. We've had issues with insects, with birds even laying nests on the counters, with like trees. If we have like a lot of wind or a storm come through and a branch falls down, that can throw it off. So really having people go out like once a week or so just to keep an eye on the counter, make sure it's operating efficiently. We just have one technician who goes out and installs our counters. He can't be everywhere in the state at once. So we do ask if we install a counter somewhere like Danville or Stanton, that we have a local count champion that kind of keeps an eye on it. And if we have like a chance of snow or ice in the forecast, they kind of go out and take up the tubes and ensure that those aren't damaged or destroyed by like a snow plow or like a street sweeper or something. This is our count program map. This is available to anybody in the public. If you go to VDOT Bike Pedestrian Program, you can click on maps and then go to bicycling maps, go to the very last one. You'll see a link to this map. This provides all of our count data in one dashboard and one interactive map. Various different base maps are available in there. We do provide things like distribution of data. So we provide the breakout for bike and pedestrian. You can look at it by the day, month, and year. Most of our counts have been short duration counts, so they've been for special studies. So you'll only see, for example, on those about 2 to 4 weeks of counts from when we did the study. But for the permanent counters, such as the ones in Arlington and the Route 66 Parallel Trail and the Capitol Trail, you will see those go back for years. We have about 80 year-over-year count sites and permanent count sites. So 50 year-over-year and 30 permanent. So here are some of the counters. As I mentioned, short duration, loaner, and technical assistance are all provided by TMPD. If you're doing a road diet, we do before and after assessments of those to get counts on facilities. We also have a very cool new data bike that VTTI has deployed that has LiDAR data and radar data for speed and passing distance. We used that for the first time in Farmville a few weeks ago for a road diet study. So this is just one of the tools in the toolbox that we use to kind of get travel behavior and counts on a facility before and after. And typically we do these short duration counts for 2 to 4 weeks. I want to go through just some use cases of why we do counts in Virginia and why it's important for project development. This is a project that I'm working with in Alexandria, or working on in Alexandria with the city. We're looking at doing a roadway reconfiguration near Braddock Road Metro Station, which is just off to the right here. This is the crossing at the Potomac Yard Trail. This is a PBSAT pedestrian bicycle safety action plan, top 1%. The issue with this is specifically these are the two trailheads, so you kind of have to do a staggered get onto the street here, come on the bike lane, and then continue on. One of the big issues we see, there is an elementary school here, and a lot of students are just coming here and they're riding on the sidewalk and continuing on that way. A lot of the metro users are also either hopping on the bike lane here and going contraflow, or they're hopping on the sidewalk and coming up here. So a lot of risk exposure occurring here, potential for crashes. So we went out and we collected data just to see what the crossings look like, how many people were kind of on the sidewalk versus in the roadway. So we used all of that data at the end to help make a determination of what is the most appropriate type of road reconfiguration to accommodate safely contraflow bicyclists so they can access the metro station at Braddock Road, or they can cross safely to continue on the trail. So by removing one lane in each direction, we're able to safely accommodate bicyclists in both directions to access the metro station, as well as less risk exposure for actually crossing the roadway. So it eliminates kind of like that multi-threat risk of having two vehicles where, for example, one might stop here, but another may not see that there's a pedestrian crossing and continue on. So that increases the risk of multiple risk exposure for pedestrians and bicyclists. So this was the data was helped leverage to do the configuration you see here. We're going to go to the parking and traffic board actually next month on this and anticipating winter spring implementation. We also use this on the Mayo Bridge in Richmond. This is it's about 112 years old, 112-year-old bridge. Has a poor rating. It's deteriorating. It's due for replacement. This is between the Manchester, if you're familiar, Manchester has seen about 5,000 new apartments constructed in the past 15 years, and downtown Richmond. So this has become a very heavy commuter route for people living in Manchester, working downtown. There are a lot of VCU employees at the hospital that use this routinely. So obviously non-compliant or non-ADA compliant sidewalks, no bike lanes, and very high design speeds on the bridge. So we went out, we did some counts, and we found that there were quite a few people using this facility. It amounted to 700 counts per day on average, despite the fact that there were no bicycle lanes. We saw about 25% of those were bicyclists, either using the sidewalk or in the road. So definitely a lot of exposure risk for people currently using the facility. We used both that data as well as feedback from the public. We had about 1,000 responses, of which 86% considered increasing bike pedestrian safety to be the highest priority, and only 8% indicated that reducing traffic delay was the highest priority. So we now have like two different things that really help arm to take to the public officials to consider the future design and cross-section for the bridge replacement. So this is what VDOT and the City of Richmond kind of came back with, a reduction of one lane in each direction and providing buffer bike lanes, a shared use path, and a wide sidewalk. So this is going to be kind of like the new cross-section that we're seeing. And if you see here at the bottom, the local news media and Richmond BizSense actually used the numbers that we provided to make the case for a narrower bridge for travel lanes, and then added facilities and improved facilities for active transportation users. More locally, you guys might be aware of the Free Bridge Lane project in Albemarle. But they basically had a kind of a demonstration project. It was going to be a pilot project for 12 months where they closed down the roadway over there to kind of get a sense of like how people would be using it, if it would increase the number of users. And then they wanted to use our counters, work with Albemarle very closely to find key locations to get the counters on the roadway and on the greenway to see what the travel trends were after the road closure during the 12-month period. And we did see a noticeable increase of about 2,100 users total during the count period. So that was about a 50% increase in the number of users between May and June of this year. And they brought this data to the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors, and they voted to permanently close Free Bridge Lane in August. I did make mention of the two-way cycle track on Franklin Street. This was some of the data we received on that. We saw about 17% were going in the contraflow direction. So over 21 days, 1,136 bicyclists. That's quite a few going against the flow of traffic, especially because VCU is right there. It's one of the only connectors to get to from the dorms over to campus. So there you can see here, this is a definite need, and the city has submitted an application for the curb round of TAP. So fingers crossed, this data was used to help leverage and boost the chances of actually this project scoring well enough to get funded. So those are kind of the key use cases we have around Virginia. I know Charlottesville, you're in the TJPDC, and the MPO there is interested in counters and kind of standing up potentially their own program or working with us to see how VDOT can help them with counts around Charlottesville and the surrounding areas. But really kind of we found the most benefit from the short duration counts around Virginia. Those seem to be like the best bang for the buck. Those 2 to 4 week counts to help leverage that data to support applications and project development and to assess before and after construction of new facilities. Yeah, that's all I have. Any questions?
Just for David?
Yeah.
Okay, Bruce. No?
David, thank you for this. Peter Thompson from Albemarle County. Good to see you. Is it safe? I take it back a different way. Would it be accurate to say that municipalities and the planning districts that we sit in are well aware of the tools you've just described and how they can be used?
So we do present them at the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee meetings, and I would say if they're not aware, we're trying to make a better public facing side of this. We're going to be revamping our website. We're going to have a whole new experience builder app for active transportation in Virginia. That's going to showcase a lot of our counts and all of that. But really the only way to kind of see updates on the count program is either to attend the BPAC or to go to the presentation packets that we put for every BPAC meeting on the VDOT Bike Ped page. Or if you're an active transportation newsletter subscriber, we provide updates on count locations as well as the services we provide in there. That's kind of where you go to actually find the loaner request. So yeah, we kind of every time we do a BPAC, we have new count sites that have been added, and then kind of why we're doing the counts. For example, talked about the Safe Routes to School program in Fairfax County. Also, Danville and Stanton, they have new bike lanes, and we're trying to develop better seasonal adjustment factors where we have just 1 month of counts. But the more that we get for different months and different facilities, we can actually start to say, if we were to see 50 users at a site in July in Danville, what could we expect to see for the entire year? So these new count sites in Danville, they're at the top, and Stanton at the bottom right, they're going to be left there for a year. There are very few bike lanes in these cities. So this is going to be kind of like our first stab at developing seasonal adjustment factors. And what we're seeing for these areas and what we're seeing for areas where we have more counts like Northern Virginia and Richmond is that it's very, very similar. They're almost all the same, unless it's like right near a school where we see kind of like the summer break is off. But generally speaking, it's very similar month to month in terms of the distribution of counts. But yeah, it's like you really either have to be in the BPAC, or you can subscribe to the newsletter and get content there. Or if I'm invited to speak at a meeting, more than happy to do that as well.
And just to clarify, so David was speaking about VDOT has a BPAC as well, because I know Charlottesville has a committee of the name, but same thing.
It was less, not the counts, but the tools that what I want to make sure that city and county staff and elected officials know that they can request that you do the type of study you did at Free Bridge, for example.
Yes. Yep. And how you do that is if you're in the newsletter, we put all of these online. If you go to the very bottom, you can see kind of the resources, and then this is where you can actually go to request a bike and pedestrian eco counter. So we have a form that you click on and you kind of provide your information, what type of count you would like and what kind of counting equipment you're looking, and then the duration. And if you have somebody that can kind of go out there and check on it periodically. So, yeah.
And I have seen staff, to answer your question a little bit more, I have seen Charlottesville and Albemarle staff at the VDOT meetings. And so they're in regular communication with David about the resources that they have.
Yeah, I work a lot with Tommy and Alberic and yeah, other folks out there. Yeah. So.
Any other questions for David? If not, I guess we'll just take a time to want to return to the discussion about the charge for CTAC or.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, everybody.
But I just again would go back that since we're running out of time and we may be taking this, we also have other people who are on the agenda and maybe don't need to sit around and listen to this if they don't need to. I don't know. If we're not going to get to his report, we shouldn't make him sit through it if he doesn't need it.
Well, Glorion's also MPO staff, so it benefits him.
I'll let him
I guess my thought is that like, yes, I think all of these are parts of the packet we probably could read, but these are mostly informational. And I think this is the only thing that we have to have an action item on, correct?
So the performance safety targets and regional transit partnership dissolution, those two were action items as well.
Oh,
Yeah, so I'd move that we just vote yes on both of them. We don't need the presentation there's always a big discussion about performance safety targets because nobody else likes to say there's an acceptable number of traffic fatalities. And every time we go through this big long thing as well, you have to have the net yet. So we might just say, well, I'll approve it as is. So that's my motion.
I would move that we just not vote on it. And
we can bring it back at your next meeting.
Yeah, give it
And-
back to there's discussion about the organization, because if we don't have a recommendation, it's gonna be made for us. So we might as well come up with a recommendation.
And I will say for the safety targets, so that item likely will be moved to the policy board, not their December meeting, but the next meeting. And so we can table the safety targets for another meeting. Okay.
okay. To the charge for CTAC.
to take action.
So we had a motion to perhaps go with scenario two, perhaps like using that as a base to.
I didn't make a motion.
Okay.
But I
We
can.
had a motion for scenario one. And that's been said. So
Correct.
That's gone, yeah, so table's open.
Yeah, if Mr. Ely doesn't mind, then yeah, I'll make a motion to consider scenario 2.
Consider sort of it.
To, I guess, vote or
Endorse.
Or
endorse.
recommend
Yeah,
that the
and I guess
policy
that's
board.
our only option is we're gonna vote on one.
Oh,
As-
We don't have to, we could say that we don't agree with, I suppose, endorse any of these scenarios and come up with one of our own.
we could also say we want to have the next meeting focused solely on this topic, provide a recommendation to the MPO policy.
Well, next meeting might be too late, right? If they're gonna decide in December.
But that's our recommendation, then give us 2 months planning period.
I mentioned that as a possibility to get to commission staff last night, at least got the sense that. The policy board felt like we've been talking about this for a long time, they're ready to act, is what I heard last night. Doesn't mean we couldn't do that, because I was a little, I know we've been talking about this for a long time, but then I was all of a sudden like, okay, here's the options and vote now. It's like, whoa. Cause I feel like this group has largely been waiting to hear what the policy board thinks they need of us.
Yeah.
That's right.
I don't feel like we've really had a lot of discussion about what we think we could bring to the table until the last hour. That's just my sense. Again, I missed a meeting or two last year. So I do think that's an option that we could say, this, we're not ready. I think we need to be prepared that they may say, no, we're gonna vote anyway, that we may want to make if you cannot delay the decision, what our backup recommendation,
believe
based
that-
on what I've heard.
I believe Sarah met with a representative of the policy board to basically hammer out these options as it were.
Well, not for these options.
Oh.
I want to make sure I clarify. So it was really just, and Donna, you could speak to it as well, since you were also there. Yeah.
So that was really just us talking through all of the talking points we've had here about like what is the tax supposed to be doing versus what we've been doing. No, it was not.
It was not
actually
options.
the document.
Yeah. And really the goal is also to make sure we can better clarify and center the committee's work around the actual decision points of the NPO. So I want to make sure we keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and I don't think delaying a decision or recommendation by 2 months is going to catastrophically the policy board's ability to make decisions. So like, I don't feel like we should I think we should continue talking about it, but I also don't feel like we should have to rush in the next 25 minutes, come up with a recommendation.
Well, and to add where I generally agree with you, as I've already stated, because to me, again, part of what we talked about is, and it is stated in our, I don't know if it's in our bylaws or our description or something, is I'm not just representing myself, I'm trying to represent, not a specific group of people, but, when I get in the community, I coincidentally was able to have a conversation with the Charlottesville Area Alliance Transportation Work Group yesterday morning, because we happened to have a meeting to get some feedback, but even that group could not come up with a clarity of what they thought made the best sense. And that's the only people I've been able to talk to about it. And there are other stakeholders that I've been like, hey, because there's a lot going on. Transportation and transit elected, the bodies that are being elected in the city and county, these types of issues are paramount, particularly in the city, on who's won. And there's the health district continues to look at it, environmental groups, public health, Charlottesville Area Alliance. There's a lot happening, and I do think and the RTP just folded last night. No big surprise, but CARDA is not going to fill all the role that RTP did, and there's a big question in a lot of our minds of there's already that void. If this thing disappears too, where again is that? Both the voice of the stakeholder groups like a C3 and PEC groups, the Blue Ridge Health District, and individuals is already thin, and some of the infrastructure is dropping. So I think it would present us, and that would be part of the argument, is it would give us an opportunity if people are willing to. It's like, okay, I need to go back to community groups I know and say, hey, what do you think of this? To help me voice our collective opinion to the policy board.
Basically give an opportunity to actually represent versus just having us voice our opinion.
Personal opinions, because we have not had that space.
Right.
I think that's a valid argument. Again, I would also still say, and we need to be prepared that they may not do that. And we may want to have if that is our response, to be able to say, if you're not willing to delay, here's what we think to the best of our ability in a short notice.
I mean, could we phrase this such that we can state that these scenarios presented in the memo, none of the options really capture how the CTAC committee currently feels like we contribute best to the structure, and that we would like time to, talk to the public or, whoever wants to talk to us and to discuss amongst ourselves and have a bit more time before coming up with like our recommendation. That would be very helpful.
Yes, I mean, I think the point is for you to discuss it, for us to capture and to carry. Yeah. Mr.
I still think, and I don't know, maybe I'll make a motion to that effect, is that the scenario in which I see CTAC being meaningful is to have at least some level of advocacy capability, and if not that, then it becomes sort of pointless. And that would be my motion of what recommendation to make, and then they can decide accordingly. If they want advocacy, then they'll offer us time to revamp our charter and make it more clear what level of advocacy is appropriate. And if they're not inclined to want advocacy, then they'll just choose option 3 and we're done.
Elected officials not wanting to hear from their constituents. That's.
Well, I mean,
I'm being sarcastic.
but those elected officials are who appointed us, So
But I don't think elected officials appoint.
No.
Yes, they did.
It depends on what you're representing.
I was encouraged to apply,
Hmm.
and the MPO chooses us, am I correct? I think that's.
So there are some representatives that are appointed by the city, some by the county, and some by the MPO.
Right.
We have 3 different
I-
bodies right now.
But to the county, I applied,
Yeah.
the county board approved me.
Yes,
That's correct.
just like for any other like board or commission that would fall under the county.
Right, yes, because your name tag says Albemarle County, right? So that means the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors voted for your appointment.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
I don't think just having Albemarle County my name necessarily means that all the time, but
Well, I mean, it does with respect to.
I'm a resident of Albemarle County. I vote Albemarle.
Oh, that's right.
Whether they- you know, my choice. Sorry, I'm getting punched.
But that's why I make the motion that, you know, we stress the importance of having some level of advocacy, rather than being just a rubber stamp on things that are already done, which is pretty much what we've been here for the last year. And, you know, Sandy, you know, when you were on the MPO staff, we had more advocacy than we've had lately.
I don't know what I'm supposed to say right now. We also did a long range transportation plan, so like right before I left, and there was a really, there were really great ways to use this committee for the long range transportation plan. And I know there were a lot of big, programming changes that you all felt very strongly about, that we were able to have conversations here. And you all were able to express your opinions to the policy board, so.
And we had some pretty robust discussions about smart scale things over the years too, so. But yeah, I think lately we've been throttled a bit in that regard and, yeah, I've noticed the difference.
So Ethan had a hand, but I've got a question at the. No,
You
go
go
ahead, you first. please.
Yes.
I was gonna support a motion, maybe a succinct motion to recommend that. Maybe request that we have more time, but before that, I was kind of thinking about these 3 in order and not being involved in the meetings, but being reminded that Sarah did join the MPO. I think reading between the lines, it could be that they tried to give us scenario 2 as a way to give the best version of what they thought we wanted. If there were these conversations, if I'm thinking about providing a few scenarios, but not being in conversation, I would provide scenario 1, which is the original, essentially a version of the original charge. On the other end of the spectrum is dissolving it. And so I guess before moving this motion to request more time, thinking that scenario 2 maybe charitably is thinking of them giving us what they think we want. And so maybe we can give some benefit of the doubt, and maybe I'm like making my pitch to use that as our backup if we don't get the extension.
Or do we want to just request that, you know, we like sort of the scope of scenario 2 because it lists more engagement with different activities from the MPO, but that we would like to include the advocacy / advisory component that folks feel strongly about.
Not opposed to it, I could clarify question, but maybe it's sort of a history question, maybe Sandy could help, so I don't know. If this CTAC was formed around the long range transportation plan. That's
part of
the
chart.
chart, yeah, right, sorry. How did it come to just kind of continue to exist after that process wrapped up?
I don't know if you came over anything in your research.
No,
No.
there was nothing, but what I did find was, and I'll just be,
That's why they put sunset rules on.
well, and I'll just be very honest, what I did find was multiple, every 4 or 5 years, folders where the same discussion has been had. So it to me seems like after every long range transportation plan around that time, we come to having the same discussion about, well, what else is this committee supposed to be doing? So I don't know when it stopped doing the, you know, LRTP and then meet once a year. I don't know when that stopped though.
The other thing I'll also add is that the Richmond area, and their version of MPO TPO actually had a discussion very similar to this too. Now they do have a CTAC committee, and I think the last I read about what Richmond did is it was very similar to have their citizens transportation advisory committee do the kinds of things that the MPO is suggesting you all do as part of option number 2, which is be the liaisons to the public and have ownership of the public participation plan and such. So there is a precedent for that.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is I'm just kind of trying to think of like, if we were gonna design this from scratch, right? Like, what would it look like? What would be the purpose? And like, and we actually have some professionals in the room who really know their shit, but I mean, I'm just a guy who, likes urban design. I'm thinking about, either we just kind of have the long range transportation plan sort of input process, which makes a lot of sense. Or if there's some, hunger for a really kind of like muscular, like citizens from lots of constituent groups and like transportation user types that, really gathered and, really paid attention to recruitment and how we assemble this committee to include all those kinds of voices, and really we're bringing that all to the next level in a more systematic way. That feels A, like we're not there. B, I'm not sure there's the appetite for it. So that kind of leaves me wondering what number 2 would even kind of look like. So we just kind of continue to get together and learn stuff and occasionally share an opinion. The long range planning process part and sort of citizen input on that does make the most sense to me. The number 1 portions. Now, the number 1 portions are also wrapped into number 2. I'm not opposed to it, but I just feel like number 1 makes the most sense for kind of what the next level is looking for. I'm not trying to like counter anybody's, love of getting together every 2 months.
Oh, it's not my point.
Second Patrick's motion then.
And just related to that, Nathan, I really want to amplify and come back to what YY shared about like the high level vision, looking to the community for the LRTP, like what are our goals? What's the vision for the community? And then proceeding forward, how do we build our projects around that and helping us articulate, from the highest level?
In my reading, level 2 offers some possibilities, and in the long range planning is what I see. My fear is that it would devolve into more fait accompli discussions about hiring a marketing team to do the website or public outreach, the first 2 or 3 things, which nobody says they want to do. So 2, as does 1, sort of holds out some possibilities. And how they're affected remains to be seen, which puts us over maybe to the better thing to do would be to craft our own, given the time to do it. And certainly then address public outreach. In my experience, and Peter seems to be a great font of information here. In my experience, it's face to face. It's who do you know? You're out, you're in the neighborhood association, you go to a meeting, you run into somebody out in the Leicester City Council meeting. You do face to face, you get real information, and they get real, whoever they are, get real information from a citizen who cares enough to show up. But that's not quantifiable. And so it doesn't look too good in this kind of situation. And so what we have is these possibilities offered, or else the null set. Bye-bye. So maybe we could come up with some combination or some assurances with the under either number 1 or 2, which we probably can't do tonight.
Yeah, and so knowing that we're running out of time, one thought I hadn't had until this that I'll put out there, but not for discussion, but just to help kind of plan to see if we proceed, is what could we possibly bring in? Again, the Blue Ridge Health District is talking about transportation from a public health standpoint. Environmental groups are talking about it from an environmental wellness standpoint. There's groups like Leaf, they're trying to do proper tree canopies in the underserved community because that makes transportation and walkability and bus shelter work and stuff. There's a lot of people that have done quantifiable data research, consumer based, lots of good stuff happening in this community, BPAC and others. Could we have them come in and educate us about what they're learning as possible as one of the tools that would help us with advocacy issues and maybe be better informed? But I'm rather than necessarily a motion. I mean, where I think I'm landing that is partially based on not what everybody's saying, so because there's still some power for number one, but that we do ask for some more time, that we think that one and or two are a good starting point, that we don't think it's time for us to disband, that we think there's value and need. And we'd like to put some more meat to the bones, because what I'm hearing from I think from Taylor was, these are not, this is it scenario 2, black and white, take it or leave it, but this is a framework for us to think about more, and that might help us then we could think more about the education opportunity. Maybe that's a stupid idea. The makeup of the group, the expectations of the group, the recruitment of the group. What do we do to make sure that we don't get too far afield as we have? I think that's, we have to acknowledge that. That is that enough of a response to give staff, to give to the policy board, that we would like more time, but think this is where we're hanging on to. We would like to get back and put some more flesh to the bones for a strong.
Yeah, I think that's excellent if we still exist. So,
well, sure.
Well, I just
we don't exist. So we say
I mean,
the point is
That's clear that we want to continue.
yes, we want to continue, and that's an excellent building.
I'm not hearing anybody other than if we don't have a good purpose, we should.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody's starting with we should disband.
So then tonight, in the hopes of existing, we ask for more time. And then once we have a better charter, we start bringing those people in. And we start listening to people who happen to know how to design roads and so on, going forward.
And we're more proactive instead of reactive.
Yes.
We can bring these experts in,
Bring
we
them
can
in.
make recommendations ahead of the stuff being presented to
Yeah,
us.
exactly right. Exactly right. There are people that know all about something.
And I just want to
So
emphasize
it's in
again,
wheelhouse.
so the LRTP is the largest deliverable in our control as the MPO. And so when we're crafting these agendas, sometimes we are the stakeholder in a VDOT study, for example, we don't control that timeline. We might solidify the agenda maybe 2 weeks out when we know where we are in the process, what's going to be presented. And so I just want to make sure that I'm providing like really clear expectations on what that could even look like in the future. But the LRTP is the largest deliverable that the MPO actually has control over.
Well, I do think that's part of what down the line we're gonna at least want to be able to ask for to the best of our ability. I think many of us have voiced, and other of us haven't voiced yet, and feel that it does feel like we're almost rubber stamped, that by the time we're asked for input, we're at step 10 of 9.
And staff, we do ask.
And sometimes
we do
that
ask.
is unavoidable, but to
Yeah.
the best of our ability, to be of service, we need to be earlier in the process, if possible.
And if the LTP is the major artifact that this body can contribute, and if there's a separate technology focused technical committee, then I think this committee may contribute to the setting the value and priority toward the next long range planning. That sounds like the most obvious way to go. And I think that may not mean that we need to hear all this like technical presentation. It maybe more about like discussion of values and priorities.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how that may look like.
So yeah, I mean, I like this, and I think, the idea of spending like a year and a half as a conduit for real robust citizen input during the LLPP planning of that process. And then spend the next 3.5 years just kind of like being ears and, hearing from some of the advocacy groups you're talking about, how transportation intersects with public health, hearing from lots of people that don't even get involved too much in sort of county and city politics per se. And then sort of like just kind of amassing that for a few years with that sort of future focus of let's bookmark all this and collate it and bring it for the next LRPT process. I mean, that's a thing we could do for those interim 3.5 years.
And it may be more about listening from city staff or engineers. Maybe more about like organizations and citizens, various like NGOs, stakeholders.
Exactly.
Do you need a motion of some sort?
I'm not sure what motion.
I think you maybe articulated it to my hearing. The best way forward in terms of, telling them that we've considered these, but we're gonna consider more.
Yeah, I think
In
it's
our next meeting,
Yeah, we want to. We want to state to them, we believe it's important that we exist. However, we'd like to dedicate our next meeting to providing them with a proposal about what our scope would be.
would you so move?
I would move.
I second.
All those in favor?
I
Damn.
got distracted, I saw a bunch of cupcakes.
Yes,
Why they hard that?
That since my first move.
Please enjoy. That's good.
Now, given that we're near out of time, I guess we can also end the meeting at this point.
Yeah, unless Mr. Greg has something
No,
to do.
that was a rocking meeting. You should.
Just love it.
Do we need some action on these action items? Or not before we just ban it? I hate to.
So the performance safety targets, we're probably gonna push that from the policy board's December meeting to
Why would you
February.
just dissolving the RTP?
Um,
They already dissolved themselves.
I mean, only because of, that's what we have been doing, right? We bring you all things that the policy board is making decisions on. And so we were just following that same process. So.
I recommend they don't. do it now.
I just want to let you know, the surveys for the 2 pipeline studies end on Friday. So if you haven't taken the survey yet, the links are in your packet. And if you have a social media account or an email list of people who would be interested, please distribute it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Adjourn.
Please eat it.
Right.
Yeah.
Stuart, man, like, just do that too.
I know. It's important to get there.
Yeah, that's good. Some 41 we weren't there.